I'm Shannon.
And I'm Mark.
And this is Dirt Sailor the Podcast. On this episode of Dirt Sailor the Podcast, we will be discussing Gavin Newsom, California, and Joe Biden's next vacation. Happy Throat Punch Thursday.
Happy Throat Punch Thursday.
How are you doing on this fine day?
I'm doing good.
Glad to hear it.
I don't know how well people in the Middle East are doing.
Doesn't appear that they are doing very well.
They have not been doing very well for thousands of years, because this is like round number 250.
Yes.
Here we go again.
Yes, over some dirt. But it's about more than dirt in that area. It's also about religion, which can include dirt, for instance, holy sites, perceptive holy sites for some, actual holy sites, depending on how you believe, what you believe, and if you believe that what you believe is really real. But if you look at some of the history, Israel has believed in a two-state solution, at least since the 40s. They agreed to a two-state solution back in 1948. And surrounding countries have declared war on Israel multiple times since then. And some of the land that Israel ultimately ended up, if you will, acquiring after that first divvying up with the United Nations was land that they took over because these countries attacked them. They originally agreed to less land.
Well, maybe that tells you that the United Nations, England, France, Germany, and all the other big power hitters, United States, ought to stay out of everybody's business and quit making decisions for them. Instead of the United Nations dictating who the property belongs to, why don't we look historically through the Bible, through the Quran, through whatever other tidbits of history? Oh, because there is history there. There are remnants of buildings. So we're going to go all the way back to the Babylonians. We're going to go back to when part of that country over there used to be called Assyria.
Right. So if you want to go back to I don't remember the precise year, something like 567 BC. Babylon warred with Israel and overthrew them, took their land, and expelled the Israelites to Babylon, actually. And there was back and forth for many years. So they were allowed to come back into the land later on before being overtaken again in 70 AD, I believe is the year that they were once again taken over and expelled from their land. And I believe Assyria comes from about that time. Was after the second expulsion of the Jewish people.
Well, it appears that they got pummeled around and beat up pretty good through history.
Over and over again. This is one of the things that I personally don't understand, is why are they the most hated people in the world?
Well, that is a darn good question, because since I have been off the last 6 weeks recovering from my little procedure I had, well, it wasn't a little procedure, but I've had the opportunity to watch a lot of news, all stations, all networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, Sky News, Fox News, all the religious outlets, pretty much every war correspondent that is over in the Middle East right now. And I've been asking that same very question to myself, because just like the hospital that was bombed that wasn't bombed, that some people still say it was bombed. Well, the hospital's still standing. It was not bombed. The parking lot behind the hospital was hit by a wayward Hamas rocket that was fired either from the back of a mosque or the back of a school. It broke up in midair, fell to the ground, caught the parking lot on fire, and up to 10 people died in the parking lot, not 500 in the hospital.
Right. It was immediately reported by Hamas, known for
Misinformation?
yes.
So they were the original
people,
curators of social media misinformation, and they're good at it.
Yeah, well, the New York Times lost their nice little check mark on Twitter or X, depending on what you call it, because of the false propaganda they put out regarding Israel targeting the hospital with a bomb.
Well, here's a little outside looking in observation from, like I always tell you, I am simple guy. Simpleton. I've been watching all the other bombings. I've been watching Israel drop 500, 1,000, 2,000-pound bombs on top of buildings. Guess what happens? The building's pummeled. You look at the bomb that they dropped on the hospital parking lot. All you see is a crater about a foot deep by about 2 foot wide. And I was able to surmise within 10 seconds that was not a bomb from the sky. Israel did not do it. While these experts around the world couldn't figure that out. You know why they couldn't figure it out?
Because they wanted what Hamas told them to be the truth.
Because the anti-Semitism is rearing its head again, and people hate the Jews. And this, we just went full circle. Why?
Hitler killed 6 million Jews, and it wasn't enough, apparently. How many times, year over year, is it okay to kill people from Israel or the Jewish people? How many times do we have to hear that it's somehow okay? Because Hamas targets Israel, 1,400 people murdered. And what do we hear? Oh, Israel should cease fire. Israel should not retaliate. Israel should just accept the losses and move on. They're a bigger country. They're bigger people. They should just accept it. You're requiring of Israel to just accept murder as just another everyday piece of life for them. Why?
Absolutely why. And I don't find it acceptable. And while you were talking, I was just thinking of numbers in my head. And I would bet if you totaled the numbers of all the Jews around the world, Israel included, the U.S. and living other places, you include all of the Palestinians, it's probably pretty close to the equal amount of people now. And why there's such animus and hatred towards each other, which that's kind of a, what's that saying, an oxymoron, or it's rhetorical because I know the answer to it. It's religious, and they just don't like each other. Not Hamas, push them off to the side. They're just a group of thugs that are terrorists that have been deemed terrorists by most of the world, except for the country that's backing them. Why do so many people hate the Palestinians? And the reason I raise that question is because how come Egypt won't open their borders and let them flood out of Gaza into Egypt? How come Jordan won't open their borders?
Well, back in 1970, when some of the Palestinian people were fleeing, going off, being welcomed into other countries. Unfortunately, wars have been happening in this region for many years. So they go into Jordan as well as other places as they're leaving. The PLO is in Jordan. And some of those individuals decide that they don't like the king of Jordan. So they attempt to assassinate the king multiple times in 1970. And this led to other countries not wanting to accept the Palestinian people, the people who represent the government, the PLO, or any such in between. They seemingly decided that they will fund wars. For instance, Iran will ship arms, ship money, whatever they have to do, but they will not allow the people in anymore. Was it solely assassination attempts that made them decide? Was it money? But yes, there are something like 22 other Arab nations in and around the area and nobody will accept them. Egypt won't say, we'll give you a pass-through card on your way to Iran, or we'll give you a pass-through card on your way to...
They don't know how many of the, as they call them, the Hamas, will infiltrate and work their way and do exactly what you talked about. They don't want to risk it.
Well, according to some of what's coming out of Israel now, is Hamas actually infiltrated part of Israel that morning. That some of the people who went through the gates before they started their reign of terror. And for the paragliders that went in, there was an interesting news article that 3 months ago was the first paragliding flight in Gaza's history, and it was done by an EU diplomat. And this individual, a former European Union envoy, so I should say a former diplomat, to the Gaza Strip, posted a video of himself conducting the first Gaza paragliding flight in history. And this is just 3 months before Hamas decided to do their first paragliding flight and use it to go into Israel and attack and kill, rape, cause mayhem, terrorism. So do we have a German diplomat to thank for giving the idea to Hamas to paraglide into Israel?
Quite possibly, or maybe he was training them. And talking about that concert that was going on and all the people that were slaughtered there, because that's where a bulk of the people with the paragliders landed. I don't know how many there were total, but I know multiples landed there because there was a couple hundred people there. And one of the she's American, but she's Jewish. I don't believe she has dual citizenship. She's back in the U.S. now. And she basically talked this morning about her being saved by a couple people there. And the gentleman you talked about that went to save his family.
Yes.
The true taken guy. Well, apparently there was multiples. There was another one that actually helped save her. And she said what they were doing to women and men there was pathetic.
Yeah, so some of our leadership here in the United States has now gone over to Israel. In fact, some of them had to hunker down when rockets were incoming. But the individuals that have gone over to Israel, and the journalists also that were there that have seen the documentation of the atrocities that happened, they believe they will have mental scarring for the rest of their life.
A lot of it will scar them for life, and some of it made a lot of people throw up. It was so bad, the video. And it was the terrorists that actually videoed it with GoPros. And now...
because it was a celebration for them.
Well, the IDF wants to release all of it, but Israel doesn't work that way, so they most likely won't. And that's why I'm confused as to Israel was the one attacked unprovoked here. And the world, or half the world, or at least the Palestinian sympathizers around the world that thinks this is a Israel-Palestinian thing, which it's not. The thing is a terrorist organization against Israel, and Israel cannot continue to survive when they have to worry about missile attacks on a daily basis their entire lives.
Yes, and so I know that I've actually had friends who have spoken to some of what's on the other side, not being a Hamas sympathizer, but if you look at Gaza and you look at the West Bank, physically looking at the area, you see what appears to be almost a prison.
It's an open-air prison is what it was called today.
An open-air prison. Looking at some of the pictures, videos, I have not personally been there, so I'm looking at it from, pictures and videos and things like that. I wouldn't disagree that it is an open-air prison as far as what it does look like, and Israel does provide, I believe it's 50% of the power to Gaza. Them getting their water and other things also comes from Israel. and other supplies because of the way things are connected up.
Right. And Hamas is more concerned about building tunnels than building power plants.
And they have received so much money, Hamas has, Palestine, but really if Hamas is your leadership, then you're not sending the money to Palestine, you're sending the money to Hamas. But while I am not disagreeing that it's an open air prison, and I do believe that something else needs to be done. I don't believe in keeping people in prison like that. However, here's my but, here's my however. What do you do when those very same people are attempting to kill you all the time?
Well, it's in the charter of Hamas, for one, which is death to Israel, death to 100% of the Jews. We'll leave the death to America out of it because everybody hates America. And it's like that in the Gaza Strip. It's like that in the other
West Bank,
Palestinian-held properties, which is the West Bank. It's like that in Syria. It's like that in Jordan. It's like that in Egypt. Oh, and apparently after watching a bunch of our college students and professors, it's like that here in America. And that kind of pushes me towards a question I have for you about this whole thing. Is there is a museum down in Southern California. It's a library, the Ronald Reagan Library. And for the last year, they've had a tour there, which is World War II in Auschwitz. And I guess it's pretty close to reality other than going to Europe and actually going to Auschwitz and going into the gas chambers and learning about the real history there. Do you think that some of these college students, that should now be a mandatory class? They should go down there and learn what it's been like for 6 million Jews to be vaporized and vanish off of this earth by no choice of theirs. Started out as men, then it went to women, then it went to others.
there were no limits as to what the Nazis were willing to do and who they were willing to do it to. It wasn't just the Jewish people, but they were a large target. They would go after many other people by the end of the war. It wasn't just the Jewish population. I do believe that we don't learn enough truth in our school system, and I think that physically going places might serve a better impact. I don't know if this installation, which is what it is because it's a traveling installation, it happens to be down at the Ronald Reagan Library right now, but it's an installation that goes to different locations. But definitely traveling to or seeing these things in person, I think would have a bigger impact. I know that I was a pretty decent World War II history buff, especially surrounding aircrafts and aircraft carriers. Might have something to do with the fact that I've been around planes since I was a toddler. But
lucky you.
And lucky me. But more on the Pacific side.
The specific side?
The specific side,
Okay.
the Atlantic side. And with that, when I've read about some of the atrocities that happened in Japan and China over the years. But it wasn't until I went to Japan and I went to Hiroshima and I went to the historical sites that they have there. And obviously I didn't see the bomb drop, wasn't alive then, but seeing what happened and seeing the physical objects or the physical location, the physical space, the things that were remaining. For instance, a watch where the band was burned off, but the watch face was still there and it stopped exactly at the dropping of the bomb. Or there were a staircase, and that staircase had essentially the burnt shadow of the person on the staircase remaining. So that was in the museum. I think there is something about actually seeing history. I know it sounds so weird to say actually seeing history, but actually seeing the very physical representation of what happened to have an impact, because I read it in books. I saw airplanes. I saw World War II airplanes. I saw a lot of World War II airplanes from the American side, some foreign, but it wasn't until I saw the physical location that it really brought home. We didn't just drop an atomic bomb. We changed people's lives forever. And there was reason behind that. But
yes, isn't it interesting how every country and every human is empathetic and sympathetic towards themselves and their own cause? Because we look at what Japan did to us and a lot of our troops. They look at what we did to them. The Romans look at what so-and-so did to them. We go through history. And it's this question I've asked you a million times. Are humans good people?
I don't know. We sit here talking about wars. We sit here talking about killing over dirt. I mean, if you look at what Japan did, I had been to Hawaii. I did go and I saw the USS Arizona. I saw the memorial site. I saw that about 2 to 3 years before I saw Hiroshima. And that had an impact on me, like seeing some of what happened there. And of course, that's from the American side. So as you said, how do you feel when somebody comes and bombs out your living location, your friends, your family? I mean, they had to go dark. They weren't allowed to have light on Oahu after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, because it could give a location for the Japanese or others to hit again. So could you imagine living your life every night you're not allowed to have any light?
Well, to pile onto that, then you have, would you call them bigots in Washington, D.C. and each state? Because then you had American citizens being rounded up just because they were Japanese.
Yes.
Because there was a fear that they would join the Japanese in the war that bombed them, or they were spies.
And did we do it to the Germans? Did we do it to the Italians? I mean, Italy was pretty bad. That's something that wasn't that long ago that people seem to forget. Italy was bad too. And yet, I don't recall learning about rounding up Italians.
Right.
I don't recall learning about rounding up the Germans. Now, I do know some of those in my history. They did try to de-Germanize their name for fear that it would lead to reprisal, but they weren't rounded up.
I wonder what my parents' real
last name was. Mm-hmm.
Because I would bet, since we have relatives, that, well, let's just go over the spelling on my mom's side. It was Geringer, Geringer.
Right.
But
they took out I can't remember what it's called, that O with the double dot over it.
Yes.
And all of the other changing of the letters. Now, sometimes that did happen at Ellis Island because the intake officer misunderstood one reason why it happened, but others knew that they could de-Germify, take the German out of their name when they came through. So they actually gave the officer a different name that they decided they were going to go with, a different spelling, a shortening, etc., because they didn't want to be targeted as being German. But I don't remember a bunch of camps for Germans here in the United States. I don't remember a bunch of camps for Italians. I don't remember anybody but the Japanese.
Right. And I don't believe that most of them received their property back.
No, they
property was taken. A lot of them were farmers.
Mm-hmm.
Because here in the Central Valley where we're at, there was a lot of farmers here. We actually had a very, very good friend, two of them, as a matter of fact, that are both Japanese, that both served in World War II, that their family members lost.
Everything,
their farms, their trucks, their cars, their money in their bank accounts. I just recently watched a show where they sent a brother and sister to a camp, and then after the war, when they were little, they ended up sending them to foster care. So they split up, so they didn't see each other they didn't see each other after that because they lost track of each other. But then 65 years later, they were hooked up again, but the sister had already died. She had died of cancer, so he was happy that she had lived a happy life. But that's just one example of literally thousands upon thousands. And that's why if you look, let's fast forward, like you said, to the 40s where there was property given to, or basically statehood given to Israel. Then there was a war.
Right. Yeah, right as they declared statehood, 48.
Then in 60s, 67-ish.
Yes.
68, there was a war.
The 6-Day War.
Yep. Shortly thereafter, there was another war.
Yes.
And then I think it was whenever Yasser Arafat came to power, and I had these dates in my head, but they've gone missing.
Is it 2000? No, the 90s.
Yeah,
they started with the Oslo
90s.
Accords.
Yes, and that was Bill Clinton.
Yes.
And
93. I think it was right after he got into office.
Yeah, I believe. And forgetting about that is a major accomplishment that he accomplished, besides being able to balance a budget with the Republican-held Congress two times. And I did not vote for him, nor would I ever vote for him. But he did some good things when you look back on history. Then you look at Yasser Arafat and the current prime minister at the time, and they came to an agreement, which was for a two-state solution. And shortly thereafter, the prime minister was assassinated, but not by a Palestinian, by a Jewish person that was a nut.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like when one of our leaders was shot, Ronald Reagan, by a nut. Fortunately, he lived. But then you go past him, and that was about the time, just reading the last few days, that Israel decided to disband one of their organizations that used to really, and not the Mossad, they used to really spy on Gaza and keep track of a lot of stuff. And they say part of disbanding that group is what led to what happened within the last 3 weeks. But what I'm getting at is war. I guess as long as there's religions, as long as there's man, there's going to be a conflict of one form or another. Because we have this conflict, we have the Ukraine-Russia, which we haven't talked about in a while. The only comment we made last week was it's a war about dirt. You have China preparing potentially to go retake Taiwan, which they feel what? The dirt's theirs.
Yes. China feels that Taiwan should not be allowed to be its own.
Yes.
So lots of dirt digging, and some we have just talked about untruthfulness. We have Hamas, of course, saying that no, they aren't the one that killed 500 people. Obviously, it wasn't 500. It appears to be about 10. But either way, people in America ran with it. Our news organizations, New York Times, ran with it. But do you know who else likes to tell lots of lies?
Are you going to talk about one of our congresswomen?
Not at this time. However,
Rashida Tlaib.
She is also a liar, and we can talk about her, but Biden as well. So Biden made his trip to Israel, and during his trip, Biden noted that he visited Israel as a senator in 1967. Biden said that he visited during the 6-Day War, right before the 6-Day War. But what he really did was visit before the 1973 Yom Kippur War. So he got his dates incorrect. He's saying that he visited a country while he was a senator when he wasn't a senator at that time. So he says, I remember the first time meeting with Golda Meir. It was right before the 6-Day War. Provable, not truthful, because he wasn't even a senator in 1967. Although he's been in the government forever, during that time, not a senator. And he's done that before where he says he either met with somebody during a specific time, but it's provable that the age is wrong, the timing is wrong, his history's completely wrong. I guess you can say, well, it was technically during or just before another war, but you're off by a lot all the time. So here's Biden saying, he just recently said he saw the pictures and atrocities that happened to the Israelis. And then it turns out, no, he heard that somebody else might have seen the photos and he was just saying that he saw them. And now it's, I met with somebody right before the 6-day war. Oh, no, that didn't happen either. He met with somebody 6 years later, not during the time he claims.
Well, the man's 80 years old. He has no cognitive abilities left. It's obvious when you look at him and you listen to him talk. That's why he has to go take all these vacations and he has to go to sleep at 9 o'clock at night, sleep till 10 o'clock in the morning, because there's just nothing there. There's no there.
There is no there. Right now, Biden is on yet another has just returned from another vacation. He has taken over a year's worth of vacation during his first presidency. It's not even over yet. He still has another year more before that presidency, that first term ends. And he is yet again on the beach in Delaware, not doing any work. And people are saying, you have to have balance in your life. You have to know when to take a mental health day. How many mental health days do you get? 367 in a 2.5-year, 3-year period? Is that how many mental health days you get?
I don't think I've ever had one mental health day. The thing that concerns me is there's serious ramifications here for what's going on around the world, because we have nuclear players in this. And I had been waiting for Israel to make that comment and for a retired or active military officer make that comment as well. And lo and behold, what I was waiting for happened yesterday, and it was by a retired Navy captain, because Israel has said multiple times, okay, if somebody made this statement to you, surrounded by what they're surrounded by and mixed in what they're mixed in, we will not go down without a fight. That was a red flag for me right away, that Israel is willing to use their nukes. And they've activated their nuclear submarines, which now their nuclear subs are running around in the Med, which tells me they have the ability to launch to where? Iran. That's why they keep telling Iran, don't push us.
Right. So if they launch even further into Israel, because right now you're talking, it's a border war, right? It was launched from the border. They got a little bit inland, but for the most part, other than some of the rockets going further inbound, it's a border war. So if they push it further, all they have to do is hit the button out of a sub. Okay, fine. You're trying to get to our interior. Here's your interior.
See, and that's why I hope with just that very statement that was made by them, that somebody that has a level head is actually with Biden and actually making decisions for him, because I don't think he's capable of making the right call.
Well, I think somebody else is making the decisions for him already. So you have to worry about who's that person standing right next to him that is actually going to be the person making the decision.
Thank you. And I was saying it with tongue in my cheek, because it's completely obvious that, and I'm not going to go back and say Trump, because everybody's been saying Trump. When Trump was in office, Iran wouldn't do this because they killed Soleimani and they took out that other military dude. North Korea was in check. Russia was in check. And that's all historically true. All you got to do is look at those 4 years. Okay. Then this president comes into office, and his handlers, and the number one clown is Jake Tapper. And he's the one that just made the statement 3 weeks ago, arrogant, putting his chest out and patting himself on the back, that the Middle East is quieter than it's ever been. Go back 20 years. Well, it's him and all these sympathizers that allowed that money to go to Iran. Who in the HE double hockey sticks trades for 4 or 5 people?
I think it was 5 for 5 or 6 for 6. 5 for 5?
$6 billion. Okay, but that's not the issue. The issue is we had sanctions, and the world had sanctions on Iran, and they were to sell no oil and make no money. What did we do? We looked the other way. So that would be his State Department and Tapper and people like that. So basically, we funded this through Iran. So we're a proxy person's proxy, if you look at it in that light, because Iran was broke. There's even documentation from our CIA and others that make that very statement that Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad and all of them were complaining that they had no money, no funding, and they couldn't buy the weapons to go after Israel because Trump had put the kiboshes on Iran and they weren't getting any money from Iran. So now we flood them with billions of dollars. We act like we didn't do it. And the history's there. The money's in the banks. And now we've opened up Pandora's box. And these guys are politically trying to put Pandora back in the box. But I don't think it's going to work this time.
No, and if you look at a couple of the things that have been said, which is we were told that Trump was going to be the cause, if he was reelected, the cause of World War III, and we were going to see massive inflation. Biden's elected. World War III is on the brink. Inflation is ultra high. So who was really doing what?
Well, it's interesting how one party says every time that the other party goes into power that they're going to cause wars and such. But then it's the very party that makes that statement that ends up being the problem. Just like our former congressman said, if you want to know what they're doing, just look at what they're accusing you of.
And that's exactly what's going on right now. And then Biden, in between his nice little vacations and everything that's been going on with him, he makes the statement that we need Congress to act and get money to Israel. But if you look at his proposal, there's more money going to Ukraine in his proposal, followed by some money to Israel and money to Palestine.
Right. Not enough money to our southern border. None of that stuff. Like
and there was some to the southern border, but not. If there was still more to Ukraine.
Right. But it's like you and I always talk about these bills that go into Congress, that go into the House, and then go for markup, and then go to Senate for them to mark them up and send them back to the House for approval, and they bounce them back and forth before it's what they think is a good bill, then they send it to the president for signature. It all needs to be individualized, line by line by line. Okay. Does Ukraine need that much money now from us? Probably not, since we have no idea where it's going. And I think that's the difference between Ukraine and Israel. The Ukrainian government for multiple years has been known as the most corrupt, or one of the most corrupt countries in the entire world. And we're sending them billions of tax dollars. And that irks me within itself, because we send all these tax-free dollars to these people. Who pays for it? We do.
And why do we keep doing it?
Yeah, our DMV fees go up. Our federal park fees go up. Our federal taxes go up. Our state taxes go up. Our luxury taxes go up if you want to buy a boat. Well, if I pay for a boat with my own money and I pay sales tax on it, why should I get a bill in the mail annually for a luxury tax?
And over again, we're told that living our life, us spending our money is a luxury, but the government deciding to just flood overseas with whatever they want is a necessity. Tell me how feeding corruption all over the world is a necessity.
And they continually feed corruption. It's been going on for multiple generations.
And if they don't think that a boat is a necessity, I understand there are wants and there are needs in life, and a boat is a want. But if you don't think that I can spend my money, or you can spend your money on things that we want to spend our money on, they better stop spending their money, and they better turn it all over to the government and kick it all overseas. Every last one of them that want to fund all this stuff overseas, turn your paychecks over. Go live in a tent on the sidewalk so every last dollar can go overseas. Your dollars.
No, it's what's that saying? It's for thee and not for me.
Yeah, they can do whatever they want.
I bet you if you dive into these bills and these appropriations, there's probably language in there taking their money out of the equation so they don't have to pay anything for it. I'm sure they get special rights and privileges. So I guess what you talked about a little while ago with the psychological relaxation time, I guess a boat would be my psychological relaxation time. So I pay for my own relaxation.
Mental health break. You should actually be able to write all of that off on your taxes because it's medical.
Yes, I take my mental health breaks by spending my hard-earned money, which I work multiple hours per year for. I'm not asking for the state to pay for it or the government. I'm paying for it myself. Well, it's all a big crock of, you know what? It's all a big crock pot of stuff because Israel needs to protect themselves. They need us to provide them with the material support, and that's it. We need to get out of the way. Ukraine, on the other hand, if we're going to provide them with material support and taxpayer dollars, that's fine. But I want to know line item by line item, just like that's who they should send over there is our IRS agents. I want to know line by line what that money's being spent on. And I don't want to see it being spent on retirement packages for their firefighters and nurses and pub owners and all that kind of stuff. I'd like to help them out, but I think we'd be better served helping our own folks out. We got a lot of problems here.
We have enough problems here and we are not helping our own people. And throwing money at the problem isn't a help. As we've seen overseas and domestically, we have thrown billions of dollars at our homeless crisis. We have thrown billions of dollars at making sure hungry children don't go hungry. We have thrown billions of dollars, and then you can just start naming all of these different programs that we've done, and we haven't solved the problem. We don't have a dollar amount that we said, yes, we reached maximum help at this much money for this many people, and this is the cycle, and this is how we break it. Instead, we make the problem grow, and we keep saying we need more money. So we decriminalized all over the place. We stopped calling things crime, and somehow not putting people in prison would stop the prison cycle, and it would help minorities. This is the bill of goods that we were sold. Instead, what do we see? We see theft. We see major crimes. We see assaults. We see all of that go up. And it went up so much, the cops said, don't contact us. We're not going to arrest for it. The most we're going to do in some of these cases is give a ticket if they stick around, and I can issue a ticket. So now we have Governor Newsom, among others, saying that they're going to have special prosecutors and special money get set aside to go after the people committing retail theft. But the retail theft has to be organized retail theft, not just regular retail theft. They created an opening for people to come and steal because they weren't going to get stopped. And now the solution is to throw money at it, create more laws of things that were already illegal, that if they had instead said, oh, we're just not going to enforce the laws, we wouldn't have this problem.
That's why I say, you know what I say? Humans are inherently bad. That is why we have to have behavior modification, or AKA laws that have a sting to them. Because if you let humans, the human condition, run amok, you get exactly what you see. You'll get mayhem. You have people that cannot follow rules. You have people that think that your property is their property and they can steal that from you at any time without consequence. And like I've said a million times, it doesn't affect guys like Gavin Newsom because he's living behind a big wall. Okay? Take him out of that wall, put him in with regular residents in a regular environment. If he gets his butt kicked a couple times, then he'll change his mindset.
And you know what? Getting your butt kicked a couple times apparently helps people change their mindset, because the mayor in DC is now asking for more help, realizing that the decriminalization hasn't worked and crime has been escalating in DC. And so now we're seeing some, not all, but some of these mayors, prosecutors, others in these cities ask for additional help and additional resources. Even New York City mayor saying that they need more cops on the streets. Well, you criminalized the cops. You made them the bad guys. You made the criminals the good guys, and you told them that they won't get punished. And then you see an increase in the crime, and now you're willing to say, my bad, please help me. Part of me, maybe this is the part where I'm a terrible human, but part of me says that you made your bed.
Lie in it?
Lie in it.
Yeah, you know who the number one contributor to all this is?
George Soros.
George Soros, Mr. Un-American, and his little son and all his little sidekicks that hang around with him.
And who apparently have top access to Biden, because the son has been in the White House many times.
Speaking of that, two things. I was looking at video today, and when the SUV came out of one of our airplanes that the president was going to ride in, I was looking at the SUV thinking, that's pretty cool. And you know who I was looking for in the SUV?
Hunter Biden.
Hunter. See if maybe he had some business dealings there with Israel or somebody.
Would not be surprised, because that's how he did his business before. He would hitch a ride with his dad, who dad being the VP at the time. So we have seen over and over again his willingness to ride along when he has business. And just recently they released some proof. Now, some are not willing to say that this is proof, and others are saying you need to make more connections for me. But there has been a couple of connect ups or dominoes that were in place, which is Joe Biden paying $2.75 million cash for the home at the beach in Delaware, right after Hunter sent the threatening text messages to the Chinese business associate for $10 million, which we heard about him saying he's basically right next to his dad, and he just wants the money. And so they don't make an enemy out of me and all of the other things that he said. So right after that is when he turns around and buys this house for cash. Then there's another one where I believe it was his brother, gets six-figure check from a company that's already filed for bankruptcy, but the brother says, we can help you, but you need to give the money.
Is that the check that was $250,000 and the bottom of it said loan payment?
So yes, the same day he gets the money from the business, he turns around and sends his brother six figures that says
his brother
loan.
Being Joe Biden.
Joe Biden, sorry. Joe Biden's brother sends him money, and it's at the bottom, it says loan repayment. Okay, that could be accepted if you show me six figures, 200 and whatever $1,000 that you loaned your brother, or more. Maybe it was more and that was the final payment. But so now they're saying we can accept this if you show that you had a loan out to your brother and he was indeed repaying you. But it looks awfully suspect.
Fishy.
That it's a domino or a Humpty Dumpty payment where one check comes in, one check goes out, and it's not into Joe Biden's brother's business account, which they have lots of business accounts, but it's not into the business account. The money went from this company directly into the brother's personal account, and then the brother turns around and gives his brother Joe Biden the money.
Well, this just shows you the criminality of the Bidens and the fact that they're corrupt. And that's what I'm so concerned about, is we're still bringing this stuff up and finding it. But because we had a gang of 8 that decided to wipe the Speaker of the House clean, it has put all this stuff on hold, because they're acting childish, and they can't look at one individual out of a couple hundred.
Out of
227 or 220,
whatever their current number of Republicans is.
They can't put together that amount so they can continue. And they keep saying the work of the people. Well, I don't care about the work of the people. They need to work for themselves and quit acting like adolescents. Go back there and do what they're paid to do, which is come up with legitimate legislation that helps the very people that they work for, i.e. us, the citizens. And, you know, I don't really now care about them 8. I don't care about Matt Gaetz, however the heck you say his name. I think it's
Gates.
Yeah. Looking at him and listening to him, I think he's a fraud. He may have some legitimate stuff. He may have a legitimate beef with McCarthy, but he should have taken the gloves off and taken him behind closed doors and said, look, I'll let you, J.A., okay, that's Jack, you know what? We got a problem here. You're not doing what you said you were going to do. We have this trigger here that we can boot you out. If you don't work with us, we might consider getting you out of here. But they're right. It was 80 or 90% or 96% of the caucus was for him, and 8 people
were able to
go with 100% of the Democrats, and they were all enjoying it because they knew that McCarthy, where he was at, Jim Jordan in the position he was at, and others were doing a good job. They weren't perfect. I don't like, and you don't like, the fact that they lump all these bills together and we have to have these continuing resolutions, all this child's play. And that's all it is. It's a game. They're gaming the system. They're gaming us.
And I had more respect for them when they would hold out and not sign the continuing resolutions.
Absolutely.
I had more shut down the government. Not in this way. I guess this is another way that they shut down the government. Are they ever going to find a Republican that they can all get behind? This is one area where the Democrats have it on lock.
Yeah, when they put one up, they vote them in and they stick with them. They go in lockstep.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So this is one area where Republicans do fall apart, is we are not united. And now the candidates that you have for Speaker of the House, all of the big names are starting to fall away. They don't have the backing. I don't know if they're looking for someone who will be a uniter, who will just kind of be a figurehead and wasn't expected to be in leadership anyway.
Well, there was a name that is now in the running that popped up a couple of days ago, and I've listened to him. I've listened to him at committee meetings. A very smart man. He's from Florida.
Byron Donalds?
Byron Donalds.
Okay, so Byron Donalds is listed as one of the potential candidates.
They should push him right up to the top.
Yeah, it is disheartening how divided Republicans are, and even for all of their flaws, how united the Democrats are. AOC, she is a Democrat socialist. That is who is her backing party, so to speak, even though they have that D, the Democrat. She's a part of the socialist group. They came out and supported Hamas. So now you have some of the leadership in the Democrat socialists who are leaving that party because of the backing of Hamas. But AOC is trying to split the hairs. She's trying to keep with her Democrat socialists, but also say
she's playing both sides of the fence. And the one who's not is Rashida
Tlaib.
She still, to this day, has had a couple of rallies outside of the halls of Congress saying that the bombing of the hospital was Israel's fault and that she supports Hamas.
And during one of her rallies, people actually went in and took over the halls of Congress.
Were they all arrested and fingerprinted and face printed and all that, just like all those people were January 6th?
And you got to look at some of the people that were even nearby but never went into the Capitol building on January 6th. They had their homes raided by the FBI. So if we don't start seeing random people's homes who were in the area but also support Palestine or Hamas. If we don't see their homes getting raided, then there's definitely an inequality there, because you didn't even have to be in the Capitol building to have the FBI show up on your doorstep.
Well, we can't kick her out because she is a U.S. citizen.
By birth, by the way. Rashida Tlaib was born here. Her parents were born overseas. They are Palestinians, and then they immigrated here to the United States. So anyone who thinks she's not a U.S. born, just go ahead and knock that out of your brain.
Well, and I listened to a local guy from her hometown that knows her dad, and her dad told him that she was missing some stuff upstairs. She didn't have a full loaf of bread. That don't trust her, don't listen to her. She's pro one side over the other, period. She has a black heart. She's a very hateful person. And we've learned there's a lot of them out there.
Yes. There are a lot of people with black souls.
So you have any California news?
I do have California news.
Good.
Two things
do
on
I.
California.
Do it.
So this first one is California, but also overseas. So Newsom went to Israel.
Why?
Well, he met with Californians, talked about those who are still being held by Hamas. And then he skipped on over to China to talk about how they are always open for a partnership on climate change. So he wants to support the U.S.-Chinese relations and make sure that trade disputes are softened, and U.S. support for self-governing of Taiwan, human rights concerns. He just wanted to touch on those issues. But the state that he's a leader of, he's trying to be a global leader on climate change.
He wants to be a global ambassador on climate change. What
Sounds a lot like he's trying to be president.
Like
I don't know.
He wants to run for president, and if over 50% of the population votes for him, I'm moving. I am moving. I'm moving to Texas.
But he'll still be the president.
Yeah, but they're getting ready to secede from the union, so that will be.
You want to join them?
Yes.
So technically on Mom's side, our history is Texas, so you can take over her side of the family, adopt it as your own. Because on your side,
I'm going to become a person of the world.
We're 20 years into the 1900s before your side of the family gets here.
Well, what we should do is go buy an island, develop our own currency, and see if we can get other countries to trade with us for something we don't have, just for a non-widget.
We'll plant an invisible tree.
Yeah, isn't that Bitcoin and that knucklehead that was just arrested?
Sam Bankman-Fried.
Sam Bankman-Fraud.
Fraud, absolutely, yes. So what we'll do is we will sell climate trees to offset, like it will be carbon credits, but in our country, carbon credits are issued based off the planting of invisible trees. So
I remember when, I believe it was eBay first came around, and you could actually donate money to a cause like that, and they would, quote, plant a tree on your behalf.
Because we are dumber than a box of rocks.
Yes.
So another thing for California, something that California has decided to do is sign Assembly Bill 91 into law, is what Gavin Newsom just did. It clears the way for Mexican students who live within 45 miles of the border, so read on the Mexican side, to pay in-state tuition at community colleges in San Diego and Imperial counties. The claim by Assemblyman David Alvarez was, "We live in a dynamic border region where we need to educate more students to fill the jobs required for growth. This bill will allow low-income residents who live close to the border to attend local community colleges, and it will save them thousands of dollars because they would pay in-state tuition, reduced in-state tuition, rather than what they would normally pay." So how do you decide if a person gets to pay the in-state Tuition, well, you look at their income to see if they can pay in-state tuition. If you look at what a middle class individual from Mexico or a family from Mexico earns, that gets them to be Mexican middle class versus American middle class, earning between 10,000 and 25,000 pesos a month puts you in middle class Mexico. That is between 500 to 1250 a month. That would put you as a needs met student for these classes, for this schooling. So you would qualify based on a different definition of what it means to be low income versus
so another
what
con.
it is. So now we are looking at individuals who will pay in-state tuition while living out of country. You can't pay in-state tuition as a United States citizen if you live close to the border and you go to a college, say if you're Nevada, Oregon, Arizona. You can't cross in and take a California class and pay in-state tuition, but you're an American citizen. So that is what we are seeing now. We are giving a new group of students who live in Mexico access to in-state tuition.
So it's another one of these guys or gals that went to college, got a degree, did a thesis or a paper, put it in theory. Now they're going to use everybody else's money to try to put it in practical application. And you know what? It won't work. You know why? It's not enough money.
Well, and what else helps to subsidize our school system? Tax dollars. It's not just your tuition, so you walk in and you pay for a class. The lottery helps to subsidize. But my property taxes have on there that I am helping to pay for some of the local schools, and that includes college. Our state dollars go to this. So if you are living in Mexico, you are shopping in Mexico, your property tax bill is not going to send money to California. Your groceries are not going to send money to California. Anything that you buy in Mexico is not going to send taxes to California.
Well, that must be part of the open borders crowd that wants this.
So don't say it's going to be supplemented. And I personally know an individual who had a practice in San Diego, and they're a dentist. They had a practice in San Diego. They didn't like all of the added regulations, which would be an added tax burden and everything that they were paying in taxes just to be in business. So they moved their whole practice to Mexico. So they didn't have to pay all of those added taxes and prove that they were really doing a good job, all of that. So they have a good practice in Mexico. Mexico's getting the benefit of their education. Mexico is getting the benefit of their business. So who do you think is going to benefit by getting a degree from the United States while living in Mexico?
Mexico? The Mexicans? The nice Mexican people south of the border?
And I have no problem with Mexico.
Oh,
you do you,
me
boo.
either.
Love
Yeah,
you.
Absolutely.
But when we're benefiting another country's people.
Oh, would that be like sending billions to the Palestinians, which goes to Hamas, sending billions to, we send a lot to Egypt too. That's why I'm surprised that we didn't demand that Egypt open their border.
Take in the
with
people.
Gaza. You must take them in, or effective today at midnight, bank accounts shut off. Same thing with Jordan. Don't badmouth us and don't badmouth our partner when we're giving you hundreds of millions of dollars every year. If you continue, midnight tonight, it's cut off. But, let's go a little bit north of our border to Oregon, as you're talking about education. You want to become a lawyer, you want to go to law school. What test do you have to take to see if you can get into law school?
Generally, you would take the LSAT.
LSAT, okay. If you want to go into regular education, SATs.
So pre-COVID, you would take the SATs.
Okay, so business.
The GMAT.
Okay. So all along the way, once you take that test and you're accepted into a college, even if it's Fresno State, Fresno City, UC Merced, whatever the college is, as you're taking these classes, is there not points along the way that you get tested for to make sure you're proficient and you're learning actually what the professor and what the institution's trying to teach you?
There's a test on the end for some of these. So, for instance, you can make it all the way to through law school, and then you would take the bar, whatever that state requires. And then medical school, same thing.
Right,
at
but
the
you still
end
have,
of everything.
Right, but you still have quizzes. You still have finals at the end of the semester, at the end of the year.
Yes, generally, but it's up to that teacher for what proves that you gain the knowledge out of their class. But
Correct.
Yes.
Well, in Oregon's infinite wisdom, the super blue state now, the deep blue Oregon has suspended basic skills graduation requirements for students. They're citing harm to minorities. Do we always automatically assume that minorities are stupid, that they're ignorant people?
Liberals do.
That they can't climb up out of their own boots and create a life and an education?
Liberals do. Unfortunately, most of the people that I know that say some of the most disparaging things think that they're being helpful. And they think, oh, they really haven't been led to a point where they can gain access to this knowledge. So then the answer is we just take away the test that proves that they would have gained this knowledge because it's not their fault. They've led this hard life. But who's been educating them this whole time?
These liberal knuckleheads.
Liberal educators. My teachers growing up, I see some of them on Facebook and different places now, and they are some of the most liberal people out there.
And you start those, quote, minorities out in a deficit when you don't do testing to see how they're progressing. And they go out and they want to get a job at, let's say, Fresno State as a office person that does payroll. Well, guess what? They never got tested on whether they can add, subtract, multiply, divide. Then they'll get PO'd when they don't get chosen for the job. And then that cycle is they go back to, well, you're just not hiring me because I'm a minority. They put them at a deficit that it's not their fault.
And instead, our educational system, which is being run by a lot of people with very liberal ideas, is not only harming, but continuing the harm. And now that harm is being seen late into adulthood. And since those parents, their kids have gone through the same liberal system, and the system is worsening over time, getting to their end result, well, now we won't even test them. We're taking away the test that proves that we've done a terrible job at educating them. That's really what it is. Now the proof that they did a bad job is gone.
Well, the very fact that you just said that, based on a podcast about 30 back, we talked about the education system across the country, and I believe it was Maryland and a couple other cities back there had all failing grades from their kids. I believe their graduating class was like less than 15% of the class, and like 90% couldn't read at a proficient level as high school students.
Yes. We are failing the children who are now adults, and then we're failing their children as they go through school. And over again, we're saying, take away the proof that we failed them because it's not fair. And arguably it isn't fair that we're putting the
you may have
signals on their back, but they're taking away the proof.
You may have just hit on something that the very educators want this testing to go away because they don't want their peers to know what terrible teachers they are.
Or not just terrible teachers. The system itself.
Or what a terrible system it
is being designed in a way that continually harms the children.
Yes.
And sometimes the teachers are, I don't want to say strong-armed, but basically they are held to abiding by that standard that is failing the children
Right.
by their
And
school
we
district.
know teachers that are very, very good. We know professors that are good. We like that field, but you have a very high percentage that get looped into that by the unions, and they have to toe a line or they get let go. So, and they, just like us, like their homes, their cars, and their psychological free time to relax their minds. So they get caught into this big system. I think it's a mess we're in here. So let's go south, California. I watched a news report today that was 6 months old. Are you familiar with Imperial County?
Decently familiar with Imperial County. That is one of the counties that the people from Mexico will be allowed to go get their education at the college level. So let's go with.
So I was born in El Centro, California, which is in Imperial County. My brother was born in, I believe, Brawley, California, which is about 14 miles away, and my sister was born there as well. So there's a big basin there, a big, what they call the Salton Sea. It's a man-made lake, basically, and it wasn't really man-made by choice. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the Salton Sea, that is a big agricultural area down there. And in the late 1800s, early 1900s, they were looking at farming and how to get water moved around to the Imperial Valley. And the Colorado River was inadvertently breached in 1905. And since all the Imperial Valley is below sea level, it flooded and made this huge, huge lake. Matter of fact, I believe at one time it was called the second or third largest lake in California. So fast forward a little bit, they're utilizing it to irrigate with. There was actually a canal that was hooked into Mexico, and I don't remember the entire flow, which way the water used to run, but it was always filling Salton Sea back up. Well, at some point in time, they cut that canal off. So the only time it gets water is through rain, which is very seldom down there, or just runoff from agriculture. Well, the Salton Sea has been receding for years. Back in the 50s and 60s, a lot of people from Palm Springs and Hollywood thought this was going to be the next great playground like Catalina Island and others. So they built whole communities there. They had ski contests there. They had big parties. It was a pretty awesome place if you look at the history. Then the Salton Sea started to evaporate. It started to smell, and it just went away as a recreational place. Now it's a bastion for drug abuse. There's a couple little communities there that the people, most of them are addicted on drugs. Well, guess what's going on in the Salton Sea? You and I have talked about lithium around the world and mining lithium. Well, let me back up just 1 inch first. There's so many pesticides, herbicides, fungicides in that water as it's evaporating. The dust from that, because it's highly windy there, it's a desert community, and you know how desert communities are. The wind blows all the time. The asthma rate in those communities down there is 4 to 10 times higher than anywhere else in the state.
That's terrible.
Experts are very concerned that if it totally evaporates, then they've got a major ecological disaster on their hands. And potentially thousands of people could die because of all the dust and everything. Well, they've come up with several ways to fix it. They talked about going back into Mexico to the Sea of Cortez, pumping seawater into it, cycling it through and letting it fill back up, on and on. Or going east to west from Salton Sea, going through our mountains straight across to our coastline, pumping water back and forth. All of them would be hundreds of millions of dollars. Well, while they were doing this testing and while they were taking samples of the lake dirt, they have discovered something, and so has our governor, because the news clip, the press conference I watched, was our governor down in Imperial County standing next to the Salton Sea saying that this is potentially the second largest lithium find in the world. So now there's companies down there setting up to start mining lithium out of the Salton Sea. So I hope once these guys and gals start mining and they start making hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, because the lake is huge. Okay? That the state, our governor, whoever the governor is at the time, forces them to pick up one of these models and start fixing and cleaning up the Salton Sea. I just found it interesting that it's a 6-month-old news clip that I missed because I look at news from the Imperial Valley occasionally. And it's the second largest potential lithium find in the entire world.
Crazy.
Something inadvertently made in 1905. And I just wonder if the lithium was really there or if through some kind of chemical composition with the chemicals that were already in the soil mixed with these herbicides and these fungicides and pesticides, it created that rare metal. Just saying.
Be interesting to find out.
Yes.
Sticking with things that are down in kind of south of us, but also to the east. So the Arizona governor has blocked Saudi Arabia from pumping water in the drought-stricken state. So speaking of water and things that are going on in the different areas. So Arizona has finally taken a stand on the irresponsible groundwater use, and they are canceling the lease of a Saudi-owned farm, which has essentially been running unrestricted with their access to Arizona water supplies. So even though they've had water issues, they have told single-family home locations cannot be built if they are going to be built and run off of well water. That they have a water problem and they cannot handle more people. Well, they have allowed these Saudi-owned farms to grow the thirsty alfalfa hay in Arizona, where there is a water problem, where there is a water crisis, another water crisis. I don't know if you can count it as a water crisis if you're building out in a desert, but already taking a water restricted area and then allowing people to grow thirsty crops there that are then exported overseas.
Yeah, doesn't it barely rain there?
Yeah, it only rains during the monsoonal seasons for the most part.
6 to 10 inches for the whole year, and that's it.
It will just drop a bunch of water. You'll see the floods will happen, and then it will all go away like it never happened.
So kind of
wash,
like
rinse, repeat.
Kind of like California is actually all desert, or it used to be. And we created irrigation canals and dams, waterways, and then we want to tear them down now and then complain about the drought and water shortage. Okay.
Yes. But they allowed these companies to build up farmlands in a drought area. And then they basically did whatever they wanted with the water, contaminating other areas, pumping out their bad water, taking whatever water that they could and would. So now Arizona is taking a stand on just what they were doing with the local water. So we'll see if that changes fully. I don't know. We're a Sue happy place. It wouldn't surprise me if Saudi Arabia wins and the people of Arizona lose and they have to keep having the alfalfa hay grown there.
I would not be surprised.
So a couple of other things going on. I know we've talked about Pfizer and the jab to no end.
The lifetime jab?
The lifetime jab. Apparently there has been some admission that the shots are contaminated. And the way in which they're contaminated is a question mark, because some are saying that it was accidentally contaminated and some are saying it was on purpose contamination. So apparently Health Canada last week on Thursday verified that Pfizer did not notify the public health authorities about the DNA contamination found in the jabs. And one expert has called this a betrayal of epic proportions. So simian virus 40, SV40, is a promoter and enhancer which Pfizer did not previously disclose, and which some experts believe that it possibly poses a cancer risk. was among the DNA contaminated materials inside the jab. And there has been more information coming out about the entire DNA sequence and what it was supposed to have versus what it wasn't supposed to have in it. And when they told the governments what was in it, and then that's what ultimately became, Canadian Health approved, FDA approved, that whole thing, that they did not release the contents of the entirety of what was in. So why does that matter? Potentially, if the way that it works inside the United States is they said that Pfizer and all of the other companies cannot be sued. So if there is a negative outcome for somebody who gets the jab, cannot be sued. Unlike other drugs and things that you take, if you have adverse reaction, you can actually sue the company for making a bad product. However, if they have been including other things that they did not tell the government about when it was approved, potentially people who had adverse reactions could actually turn around and sue Pfizer. On the other hand, if the government knew about it and didn't release the information about what was actually in the shot, the government potentially has liability issues there.
So this brings up an interesting point, and not just the one that's at the top of my head. Let's go 7 weeks ago. Let's go back to the beginning of COVID, the shots, how the governments had people running scared because they thought everybody was going to die, and they started forcing people to take the shot or you'd get terminated. And we know, we've talked about that. We've played that whole scenario out. So that caused a big rift between my SoCal family and I up here. Almost totally decimated the relationship between my brother and my nephew and myself and our family members up here. We worked through it. After it was over, after everybody was better, it wasn't running rampant, we all started to see each other again. Don't have to play that whole story out. Okay, fast forward to a little over 7 weeks ago. I go to the doctor, as you know. I find out that I have an issue with my heart. A little bit on the nervous side because it's an unknown that I never expected to happen in my lifetime. I'm talking with my brother. I'm chatting with him, who, even though he's 7 years older than me and he thinks he's wiser, he's really not. He's a pretty smart guy, but I don't think he's smarter than I am. Anyway, so he makes a statement to me. Trust the science as it relates to what they're going to do to my heart and all that. And I knew what he was talking about, what that pointed, hey, trust the science. It was meant to trust that science, but I should have trusted the science on the other as well, and I didn't. And what you just talked about for 5 minutes is exactly why I didn't trust the science. You know why I trusted the science with my heart surgeon and the heart doctors? They've been working on heart meds, heart surgery, heart replacement, valve replacement, using arteries for bypass versus veins, all that packaged into one for probably the last 80 years. They've been working on those vaccines how long?
Well, the mRNA is brand new.
Yes.
And this was the first widely tested time that they used the mRNA was essentially by forcing people to get it. They could find out what the outcome was. Because when they did the second shot, I believe they only had 37 people in their trial.
Yeah, and that's why I was very skeptical about that shot. And everybody started deeming it the jab because of the unproven science. I didn't trust it. I'm a simple guy, but I can read between the lines. Hence, I trust the heart doctors. I don't trust the doctors or the labs that created this, like I said, for that very reason you just talked about. And there's going to be more come out, like you and I talked. Empirical data. We got to wait for the science. And there's going to be more come out that probably out of the million that died in America, probably 100,000 of them died because they took a shot that had a bunch of crud in it. And it led to a big mess.
It did. And if you look at the 1918 flu pandemic that hit 100 and whatever years ago, if you nearly 100 years ago at the time we were going through COVID, but if you looked at that, they started taking bodies out of the ground and testing them. Well, it turned out people were dying of aspirin poisoning and other issues.
See, that was one of my concerns as well, is when my doctor told me about, I believe it was a Johnson & Johnson shot, had to be refrigerated. And if it was left out for any prolonged period of time, then it could become highly toxic and dangerous. Well, my thing was, well, then what about the chain of custody? When you shipped it from point A to point B, was it under climate control? Just because somebody signs a document and says it was, doesn't mean it was. You take it to Walgreens or whatever pharmacy, you put it in their cold box. How do we know? That's another unknown. And I don't put a lot of trust in people I don't know. They have to really prove to me, and I can tell by looking in their eyes and looking in their soul, whether they're an honest or a dishonest individual.
Yeah, one of the things that came out as far as the Johnson & Johnson was that women in my age group, it led to a higher likelihood of blood clots. And there was almost this response, oh, well, you have a risk of blood clots while you're taking birth control pills, so no big deal. Well, the risk of this was higher, number one. And then number two, who are you to say, it's okay, you could die while taking this, so you might as well take the risk over here too? What if I'm not taking that drug? What if I'm not taking that thing? I now have to take a risk simply because you said, well, statistically it's low enough, and on the whole it would help the American people, so we don't care.
A lot of assumptions there, huh?
There are. And just like with the myocarditis, when they started seeing issues with myocarditis among the young, among those who were less at risk if they actually got COVID. And then another thing we end up having, so we have Paxlovid. We have other drugs that have started to show that they help if given early while somebody has COVID, and they
monoclonal
antibodies, they lead to better outcomes. So Pfizer has now doubled the cost of that drug. They are also, they have you on both ends. They have you getting the shot, and then they have you taking the remedy once you get COVID, because you are going to get COVID.
That is not what we were told.
Joe Biden told me that 100% I had no...
shot, you will be fine.
And then they started dialing down the percentage over time of how fine you'll be.
Joe had 5 of them. And he doesn't know whether he had 5 of them or not. Just because you stick a needle in the arm, placebo.
Who knows with him?
Who knows? He doesn't.
Yeah, so we have a lot going on there. And I understand it's still a highly charged issue.
Well, the election's coming up, so don't you worry. And make a comeback.
Yeah. Oh, and speaking of the elections coming up, be sure that you don't post memes if you're a Republican. You could potentially get 7 months in prison. There is an individual who posted memes about Hillary Clinton, and one of them included, save time, avoid the line, vote from home, text Hillary to this number. And his memes, because they were somewhat of election interference, this gentleman was sentenced to prison for misleading voters.
Oh, you mean Hillary Clinton? The lady that still believes that she won the election.
Yes.
The one that still blames it on Russian disinformation and at the election cycle when she was running was a fraud. You mean that one? Oh, wait a minute. We haven't rounded her up and arrested her and prosecuted her for any of her wrongdoings over the last 40 years. Yet some young lad that does a simple meme goes to prison.
Yeah, but there were individuals who posted ones for Republicans. Hey, Trump supporters, skip the poll lines at #election 2016 and text in your vote. That person wasn't arrested. That person wasn't sentenced to any prison time. As long as you're of the wrong side, you have the chance at...
Well, I'm of the right side because I'm not voting this year. I am going to vote for the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. Oh, wait a minute. He doesn't have to run. He's royalty, so he is in charge.
This has been a podcast produced and edited by the Dirt Sailor duo. Mark and Shannon are a father-daughter team who both served in the United States Navy. This production is protected by copyright laws. Until next time, anchors away.